Have you ever learned something so stunning that it completely changed your perspective on the world? If you've been going about your life in one way, then bang, something happens and nothing is the same again, and you begin to wonder who you are and how you came to be this way. I had no idea that one specific winter's night would turn out to be such a life-changing experience for me. I'd been over at my buddy Josiah's house watching films, and I'd planned to remain and then return to my parents' house the next day. They're usually quite casual about things like that, but my dad contacted me about 8 p.m. and asked me to come home. He didn't want me driving in the dark because there had been several attacks in our region that had everyone worried. I was sad to leave, but by summer, I'd be off to college and wouldn't have to tell anyone what time I'd be home. Bring it on, I said. It was getting dark by the time I said my goodbyes and gathered my belongings. I decided to take the shortest route home. My gasoline was dangerously low, as I could see. You could probably guess what occurred next. I was about 5 miles out of town when my automobile came to a standstill, and of course it was in the middle of nowhere. Jose's house was about 10 miles away, and here I was, trapped in the middle. I had no intention of walking back to Josiah's. I couldn't leave my car like that. I knew there was a petrol station about 3 miles away, close to my house. Could I run there and back? What was I thinking? I'd just call my father. He'd bring some gasoline and we'd be set. I couldn't believe it when I grabbed my phone out of my bag. This felt like one of those cliched, scary films. In the middle of nowhere, the girl runs out of gas. The girl notices that it is getting dark. The girl realizes that her phone's battery is completely dead. How had my car and phone both died at the same time? This was a disaster. Oh, this was terrible. There was no other option. I would have to sleep in my car, or I can face my worries about visiting a dark forest alone at night and go locate someone who can help. I had my doubts that anyone lived in this desolation, but I had to go check. I realized where I was as I moved through the trees. This was the site of one of the attacks. It'd been in the media all week, and some of the trees even had police warning tape on them. What exactly was I doing here? I was heading right into a deadly trap. That's just my luck. It began to snow the next second. I'd entirely forgotten about the impending snowstorm. Great! At this rate, the snow would bury my car before I returned. This was turning out to be a night to remember, and I couldn't even use Instagram's story since my phone was dead. Typical. I was about to give up and accept that I would have to sleep in my car. I was walking down the street when I noticed a light in the distance. As I approached, I realized it was a fire. Oh my goodness, as if things couldn't get any worse tonight. Was I about to come across a fire when my car caught fire? There is no way this could happen to me. Then I realized it was simply a small bonfire, but it was dangerously close to the nearby hut. As I knocked on the door, I approached with caution and summoned every ounce of courage in my body. As I heard footsteps approaching, my heart began to pound in my chest. Who would live in such a place? It was essentially a remodeled shack. My father's garden shed was much larger. I wanted to flee as soon as the door opened. This massive man stood in the doorway. He just stood there staring at me. I'm not sure who was more surprised, me or him. I was unable to yell. I couldn't get away. I simply froze. His beard was so long that it appeared and smelled as if he hadn't had a shower in, well, ever. My palms became clammy, as if I were afraid, and all I could think about was how much my parents would kill me for walking into a trap like this. I'm only 18, but I know when I shouldn't be chatting with strangers, and this was one of those times. He beckoned me in, and I didn't want to go in, but I didn't have an option. What if he pursued me if I fled? So I swallowed my trepidation and followed him inside. You won't believe what's within. Or, more accurately, who was in there. There were maybe 20 people sitting around the fire, and they all looked pretty weird. It was almost as if they were in a trance. First and foremost, I couldn't believe there was a fire in the middle of the room. Second, who were these individuals? They all looked similar, so I assumed they were related or something. Had I intruded on a family gathering? Were they summoning the ancestors or something? Seriously, it was bizarre. The man who had opened the door encouraged me to join them in front of the fire. All eyes were on me as I headed towards an open spot in the corner. I felt completely out of place. All I needed was some gasoline. I faltered as I turned to face the man with the beard. No, it's not a problem. I don't want to bother you. I simply require assistance with my vehicle. I ran out of gas and I really need to get home. And now my phone is dead and I've come to a halt. The man burst out laughing. He didn't give a damn. He then said, "Don't worry, we'll assist you. But first, please take a seat. Come in and warm up. You're not going anywhere tonight." What did he mean when he said I wasn't going anywhere tonight? I needed to get home. I had no idea what time it was, but I knew my parents would be panicking right about now. I went to check the time on my phone, only to see it was dead. What happens next? Didn't this place have a clock? I got up to leave, but the man with the beard stopped me and told me I had to eat first. That's when I noticed the massive pot on fire. How could I have missed it? It resembled a large cauldron. He handed me a bowl of what appeared to be a mystery stew, and I thanked him. This was not going to happen. I'd most likely perish from food poisoning. But as everyone else began eating and slurping in approval of how great it was, I decided to give it a shot. Otherwise, they'd assume I was some obnoxious young lady. And guess what? It wasn't horrible at all. In fact, it was rather amazing. And they just grilled it over an open fire. Wow. Except for s'mores and the rare BBQ, I mainly just microwaved my food. We practically never cooked with fire. Perhaps they were onto something here. I politely thanked them and excused myself after eating, but they wouldn't let me go. They told me I could leave in the morning, but only when the snow stopped falling, or else I'd become sick. They even made me a tiny bed in the corner by the fire to keep me warm. They were being unusually nice to me. I asked where the loo was and apologized for needing to go. The guy with the beard showed me where it was, and I was so relieved when it turned out to be a toilet. I guess I was anticipating a hole in the earth or something. I couldn't wait to tell the other girls at school. That was if I ever got out of here alive. I returned from the loo and couldn't find the tea, but now everyone was singing, and when I returned to join them, I realized this was actually quite pleasant. I hadn't sung in public in years. I felt like I had been transported back to summer camp. These people were completely insane. Get a television, people. However, as I was thinking about this, another feeling washed over me. I felt at ease. If they killed me in the middle of the night, at least my final dinner had been delicious. Everyone eventually departed and went to bed, and I lay there wondering if this night could get much stranger. I awoke in the middle of the night with no notion of where I was. I was cold, and the fire had gone out. I reached for my phone out of habit, only to realize it had died. But I decided to double-check anyhow. It had turned on, much to my astonishment. It was just 4%, but I decided I could at least phone my folks. I had 27 missed phone calls. Oh no, it was 2 a.m., and they'd most likely already called the cops, especially with all of these attacks going on. My mother answered after only one ring, and she sounded awful. She was curious as to where I was and why I hadn't called her. I assured her that I was all right and that I was staying at the home of an unknown family near the woodland. I was whispering since the old man was sleeping on the other side of the room. I didn't want to disturb him. Of course, my mother screamed and stated that they were on their way right now. I became terrified. My folks were enraged. I tried to go as discreetly as possible and decided to wait for them in my car. But they were already outside when I arrived at the woodland. They were traveling so rapidly that I thought they were going to crash into the house. My mother rushed out and ran towards me, while my father yelled, "Skylar, get in this car right now. You're in big trouble, my dear." Then things got worse. I could hear police sirens. My mother burst out laughing, asking what this location was, how she believed I'd been kidnapped by these horrible people, and how I knew not to come here. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. She was being really harsh. She had no idea who these folks were. I wanted to tell her that, but the cops were approaching. And the man with the beard stood in the doorway, crestfallen. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, hoping he would hear me. I felt abruptly humiliated. My parents had made such a scene, and now the cops would most likely arrest all of these individuals who had been so nice. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how great their lives were. I assured the officers that I was all right. My car had recently run out of fuel. We could also go home. Even though there were no difficulties, they proceeded to investigate. My parents urged me to get in the car, which I did, but then I came to a halt. "Wait a minute," I said. Then I dashed back towards the house and thanked the man with the beard. "By the way, my name is Skylar, and I'm quite appreciative. You people are, well, quite cool. I apologize if I appeared nervous at first. I simply didn't know what to anticipate. He took my hand in his and shook it, saying, "Please come back and visit us soon. Skylar, you have a great voice. By the way, my name is Xavier." I wanted to scream at my parents about how they acted back there, but I realized I'd done the same thing at first. I condemned them because they lived differently than I did, and I felt ashamed of myself. I mean, I had pondered the possibility that they were the attackers. We returned the next day to recover my car, and Xavier and his brothers and sons assisted us in digging it out of the snow. When my father saw how nice they were, he realized the same thing. Even though I hadn't shared his tea with him, Bella grinned and waved at me. I mean, I'm not ready to give up my phone or relocate to the forest anytime soon, but I've become close friends with Xavier and his family, and I go visit them at least once a week now. They are really wonderful individuals, and I was incorrect to pass judgment on them. They may live simply, yet they are far happier than many others in my town, and I adore the fact that they gather around the fire to tell stories and sing together.